Welcome back to Quantum Conversations. My name is Sarah, and I'm so excited to bring you another episode with my co-host, Carrie Bennett. We are really enjoying giving you this show and talking about these topics that seem really complex so that we can help them be a little bit more understandable to the everyday person. I just wanted to remind you to head down into the show notes to make sure you get my free resources and Carrie's free resources. We've both spent a lot of time compiling our favorite list of products, as well as how you can actually implement a lot of these things into your daily life for free using our guides. We also both have amazing courses that you have access to in the show notes as well. And we co-host a course together called Quantum Fertility. We've actually had some quantum fertility babies just born this summer, and we have several quantum fertility pregnancies going on right now where women were told that they were not going to get pregnant, and we have been able to show them the way using these circadian principles and quantum biology, and we're so grateful for this. So make sure you head down to the show notes, check out those resources, check out those courses. And if you are enjoying the show, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, leave us a comment. And if you're listening on the podcast app, please head on over to Apple or Spotify, leave us up to a 5-star review. Since we are such a brand new show, we want to make sure that we're getting this message out to as many people as possible. Again, we want to make these concepts of quantum biology and circadian biology understandable and applicable to the everyday person. We want you to pull up a chair, come hang out, and enjoy this conversation with me and Carrie, and have a fantastic day. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Quantum Conversations. Let's talk about melatonin. I'm so excited about this one.
Yeah, I think similarly to vitamin D, right? Mm-hmm. There's nuance. There's a broader discussion to be had about melatonin than typically I think what we're taught. Yep. And so, where do you want to start?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is I don't know that people really understand how melatonin is made and works in the body. They just think it's a supplement you can take at night to help you fall asleep. But I don't think they understand like our mitochondria make it during the day, like the purpose of it. So maybe we can start there.
Yeah, let's go basic. Let's go super basic. Okay. So mitochondria is a molecule, we'll call it for now. And it's made in 2 different capacities in the body. And I think the capacity that most people are familiar with is the fact that it can help them fall asleep. Yeah. And so melatonin, one of the things melatonin does do is it signals nighttime to our body. And the way that it does that is when there's no more blue light present in our environment, which happens after sunset, that's the time when the pineal gland in the brain, which is a gland in the brain that's near the hypothalamus and the pituitary, all those kind of areas that we talk about when it comes to the circadian signaling. That pineal gland, when it senses a lack of blue light, and especially when it senses darkness, it starts to convert serotonin into melatonin. And that melatonin gets secreted into our bloodstream, where it then travels to any cell of the body that needs it, helping to facilitate sleep, but also helping to facilitate a lot of repair mechanisms that rely on melatonin while we are asleep. But that melatonin, Sarah, and I know you know this, only makes up about 5% of the melatonin that's produced in the entire body. Right. The rest of the melatonin is made in the mitochondria, typically during daylight, right? During daylight. And so we have now mitochondrial melatonin, which is also called subcellular melatonin or extra pineal melatonin. I'm going to call it mitochondrial melatonin, I think, here, just to make it easier to know where it's coming from. And that the job of that mitochondrial melatonin is essentially to clean up natural damage that occurs as the mitochondria are flowing electrons through the electron transport chain. Because naturally that process results in some lost electrons, which we call free radicals or reactive oxygen species. And so it makes sense to have something to clean up the damage right on site. And so that's what the mitochondria have been optimized to do. They not only make the energy for us, but they clean up the damage that happens from that energy production pathway, namely in this mitochondrial melatonin production that's made inside the mitochondria and is enhanced by near infrared light.
Yep.
Hence why you can get a benefit, and there's a lot of it that can be made, and especially more when we have near infrared light on our bodies, typically made during the day, where when we think about pineal melatonin, it's made at night.
Yeah. And that's in response to darkness, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So only one of them truly has a circadian rhythm to it, which if typically when someone gets their melatonin levels tested, we typically test in saliva, or we'll test in blood or urine. That melatonin is the melatonin that comes from the pineal gland, and it should, I hate that word, but it should show a flat line during the day, an elevation at sunset, and then a big peak in the middle of the night when it's dark, when the body is in darkness. And then it will drop off during the morning hours. And that's specifically the pineal melatonin. And it helps to maintain our circadian rhythm. It tells the brain when it's nighttime, whereas morning sunlight tells the brain when the day has begun. And so it kind of we got two things, right, that monitor the circadian rhythm: the surge of cortisol in the morning in response to morning light, and the surge of melatonin at night in response to darkness. Those are circadian regulators. But the melatonin that's made inside of the mitochondria does not exhibit that same spike, right? It's just made when it's needed, as it's needed. And in cells that are really stressed, actually, they can upregulate that melatonin production because when a cell is more stressed, it likely is experiencing more damage, and that mitochondria then can help to reverse and calm all that damage that's being produced.
So during the day, we can make this subcellular or mitochondrial melatonin, and that's in response to near infrared light, correct?
Yeah, it's in response to near infrared light. And so let's talk infrared, right? Because that's another confusing one.
Yes.
It's a wavelength range of light, just like visible light is. So the visible light is the colors of the rainbow. That comes from sunlight, right? But other energies of light or other wavelengths of light come from the sun that are not just that visible rainbow spectrum. And so obviously, I think we talked about UVB light making vitamin D. That's ultraviolet light. We cannot see it, but actually the majority of sunlight, 54% of sunlight, give or take, is in the infrared range. So it's above, I thought it was 40%. 40% is infrared A. 54% though is the rest. So that's another good point, right? So that infrared light, let's say 50% or a little bit more of light that comes to our Earth, the surface of the Earth, is infrared. But that infrared then, like you alluded to, it's divided up into different categories. It can be called near infrared, mid infrared, and far infrared. Sometimes you can also call it infrared A, B, and C. And so that near infrared range is typically what they've recognized as stimulating mitochondrial melatonin production. Interestingly, mitochondria also produce their own infrared, and they can increase infrared production as well in response to different stimuli. And so it's almost like mitochondria, and I haven't seen that. This is just me, kind of speaking out here. I haven't really seen any research talking about this, but in times of stress, melatonin is increased. But is it because the mitochondria can increase their infrared heat exposure or their heat production to help facilitate their own internal melatonin production? I think that's the case for sure. Yeah. And so yeah, it's fascinating when you look into this, that it's all of it's connected to the light, and specifically this near infrared light that optimizes melatonin inside the mitochondria. That also means that will dictate the health of the mitochondria, or how efficient a mitochondria is, and it'll also calm the damage or the oxidative stress that can occur just naturally in the mitochondria. And so when you look at it this way, you realize how important near infrared exposure is to the body on a regular basis.
Yeah, and you mentioned that our bodies can make near infrared, so we can do that with cold therapy. Is that correct?
Yeah. So there's a protein in the mitochondrial electron transport chain, not to get too scientific, but beyond just the electron transport chain, it's not in there. It's in that same fold, right? That inner lining of the mitochondria. In that same folding is another protein that's called UCP2, or uncoupling protein 2. And what it can do is it can basically open and allow protons to flow and rush back into the inside of the mitochondria. And as it does that, it makes heat. And so it can just, like you said, we know it can do that. And one of the things that opens that protein to flood the protons back in is cold exposure. But technically cold can be a stressor, right? So it's again, stressors can upregulate melatonin production. So that's where I'm just drawing these connections. Are the stressors increasing UCP2, flow basically, and that results in mitochondrial melatonin production to clear out damage.
Yeah. So our bodies are making this during the day, essentially, to clean up inflammation that's happening. So ROS is basically inflammation that's happening, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. And I liken it to this, Sarah. This is the analogy I give oftentimes when I'm lecturing on this. It's like you might as well clean up the damage all day long as opposed to waiting
trying to do it all at night.
Right. All at night. And so it's like tidying your house all day long, especially if you've got kids.
Yeah. And they leave stuff everywhere. And
everywhere. And then you're like, why do I ever serve rice ever again?
Oh, because it's no rice.
I always look at my kitchen floor after rice. And the problem with rice, Sarah, is that it really sweeps up best when it's dry.
Yeah. So it's when it's sticky. Trust me, I know this one. Yeah. No rice.
So anyways, so that being said, right, it's easier to clean up our house all day long to keep it tidy. And so that's the same thing going on inside of the mitochondria and the cells. It's easy to tidy up the inflammation all day long, as opposed to relying on just a dose of pineal melatonin to clear all the damage that's been accrued throughout the day.
Absolutely. And so we can make this outdoors essentially, because a big part of the sunlight spectrum is that near infrared. Using a red light therapy panel can also be helpful. Is that correct?
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah. Typically, red light therapy panels contain both red light, but they also contain at least near one, infrared, if not two wavelengths of near infrared. Yeah.
Yeah. It depends on the panel. And it's interesting to look at different ones. Like, I don't think people understand how these panels work. Like, you can get some that are specific wavelengths. Some of them go up a little bit higher. So you kind of really do have to look at what the panel actually is doing, because people are like, oh, I just got this one off Amazon. And I'm like, well, I don't really know the logistics of that one. Don't know the flicker, non-native EMF, specific nanometer. So you do have to know kind of what you're getting. But I know EMR Tech is a good brand that I like and I trust, that's got the wavelengths that can help you with this near infrared light that can help you with that mitochondrial melatonin.
Yeah, certainly. And I've been loving Kelly Bento's panel lately.
Oh yeah.
She's got a new red light therapy company called Soleil Well, and it just feels glorious. It's just
really,
it's a lovely panel. So
I've been having a lot of people in my group have actually been buying some of her panels. So we've got, and she's got like this bullet, I guess, that you can put it,
the
like
flashlight.
Yeah. You can put it in your ear, your nose, like any place that you need it. But it's
some really targeted red light therapy. Yeah, it's her panel is fascinatingly. Her panel, whenever I turn it on, I always have at least one cat and one child migrate towards the light. It's like they want to sit on my lap, and it's like, don't steal my light.
Yeah.
Of course I let him, right? But yeah, there's just, it's a very soothing brand. So I've really enjoyed that one.
Nice.
And so that's some sources of infrared, but let's also talk about maybe what we can do just in our modern indoor environment to also improve it, because we're lacking in all infrared these days, but especially near infrared, because modern living has made our homes very energy efficient, because infrared light actually makes it harder to keep our homes cool in the summer.
Yeah.
Infrared coming through the windows. You want to keep it regulated in the winter, right?
Yeah.
And so what you have on windows these days is an infrared blocking film so that we're not getting excessive infrared. And so we're really deficient through modern window glass, and then modern light bulbs, LEDs typically, and compact fluorescents or fluorescent tubes.
Full blue, no red, no infrared, nothing.
Completely eliminated all the infrared, right?
Yeah.
So we're just really infrared deficient these days. And I think that's obviously we're seeing a lot of health challenges. I think a lot of it's related to the lack of infrared. Remember that infrared also just builds exclusion zone water.
Exactly.
Right. So that's just another foundational thing that we're getting here. And so it's really fascinating when you're like, wait a second, we don't have it anymore. Right? So opening windows makes a difference. Am I going to get in trouble for this? I still use incandescent bulbs, right? But I use the Edison style incandescent bulbs. So you get a little bit of heat from those lights, which is the infrared that we're looking at. In the winter, we do love fires in the fireplace and whatever, safe candles, but 3 cats, 3 kids, it's not always safe to have candles. But if you can light candles, go for it.
Good beeswax candles. Yeah.
Beeswax.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Well, yeah, we will get some questions.
Yeah, we'll get hammered on
beeswax.
I've been doing this online thing for a minute.
Yeah, that's right. Anticipating. I love it. So you can make your internal environment more infrared friendly, and even things like getting more like one of those heat bulbs, like a sauna space
bulb. Yeah, absolutely. That's a good thing. I know a lot of people get those, put them in their office when they're working. If they have to be indoors and they can't have a window cracked or open, sauna space red light bulb is great.
Yeah. And so back in the day when I was just kind of hacking through this at my office space, I don't recommend this, I almost burned my hand, but a Ruby Lex heat bulb, like you would basically shine on chickens with a lamp, like a clamp lamp, just boom, clamp that thing on, right? But in the winter, it really felt good,
it's really
supplementing
nice.
that infrared. Yeah.
I used to have one of those beside my bed before I got a panel, and I would actually shine it on my belly before going to sleep.
Sounds
it was
nice.
Super soothing and nice and warm. Yeah. And my acupuncturist used to have those too, like the heat red light bulbs when he would do acupuncture, which that's what made me buy one, because he had one. I was like, oh, this feels so good. It's so warm. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think infrared is one of those things, especially if you experience seasonality in your environment, where there comes a point in the year where you're just like,
you need it.
Just feels
that's
so
why
soothing.
Sauna is so important in the winter time. Yeah.
Exactly. And has the added benefit right now. A lot of saunas are more far infrared. Some of them are full spectrum. But even if you're just in a far infrared heat, you're still getting the benefit of exclusion zone water. So I always think infrared is a benefit.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've got a near infrared sauna, which I love. And I know you have one too. And that's,
there's some really great therapeutic benefits to, I love infrared in all of its many forms.
Yeah.
Okay. So because one of the things, right, that near infrared makes melatonin, obviously then darkness makes in our pineal gland, 2 things that are lacking these days in most living environments: true darkness at night and enough infrared exposure during the day.
Yep.
Then we should talk about maybe what melatonin does too beyond that, right? I mean, a lot of people talk about antioxidants. And so they want to consume like these green drinks or these drinks that are full of antioxidants. But melatonin really is the body's primary antioxidant system. And I say that because melatonin actually is what helps to either recycle or just drive the production of other antioxidant systems as well, like glutathione, like SOD, right? Superoxide dismutase. And so if we don't have adequate melatonin, and you're trying to, that right there, that is the antioxidant system that you have to optimize. All the other systems are going to tank as well if you don't have optimized melatonin.
Yeah.
And so it's really good at just, reducing the oxidative stress like we talked about, not just itself, but all of the other pathways that it activates.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, if you, are we going to go here now with To supplement or not to
That's
supplement?
what I was going to say. I'm like, okay, now do we open up this can of worms? Because there's so much controversy around this. And there are some people that are just so staunchly against it. You look at some of the research that they point out and there's holes there, and then, you and I both, you sent me the podcast with Russell Ryder and Mercola to listen to before this, which there's a lot of interesting and compelling evidence for supplementation also. And I know like all of our mitochondriac people are like, no, don't say
ever
it.
Suggest
Don't ever
it.
yeah. So like, maybe we can have a nuanced conversation about this because I don't feel like I feel like people abuse melatonin to a point. Like they don't allow their natural circadian rhythm. They're not getting out into sunlight. I think that being sunlight deficient is going to cause a huge melatonin deficiency, as we talked about this near infrared, which we can get from literally going outside. And then you even, I've known about this study, but you posted it on your Instagram today. Even if you're just like in the shade, right? It can bounce off of grass and trees and you can still get an infrared. You don't have to be like sunbathing naked, which I think is the best thing to do if you can.
It's great. Yeah, it's great.
You don't have to do that to get the near infrared. So
can I tell you though something interesting too? This is a slightly off topic, but there is a research article about optics and light, basically we'll say light in the human body and melatonin production. And it did look into melanin concentration in the skin and the absorption of near infrared light. And there were changes in the absorption of near infrared light based on melanin levels in the skin. But that doesn't say don't tan, or it doesn't say it's bad to be tan by any means. What that says is perhaps the body also has another mechanism with which it supports levels of oxidative stress using melanin, which we know it does, right? So maybe near infrared doesn't have to penetrate as deep because instead when sunlight strikes the skin, melanin causes water to make more molecular hydrogen and molecular oxygen, which can act as basically select antioxidants. It can donate electrons to calm inflammation. So it's very nuanced, right? And it's just it's so cool to start breaking it down. But in terms of supplementing, I'm still of the opinion, step one always has to be, you have to help your body produce its own, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Because when melatonin surges at night, that's typically also when we surge other key hormones like human growth hormone, right? Oxytocin, there's other things that help to really organize and coordinate so much of our physiology. So simply saying, well, screw it, I'm going to stay up and watching this movie until 2:00 in the morning and then just take a high dose of melatonin and I'll fall asleep and it'll be okay. I would disagree with that drastically because there's a reason why that we're supposed to have a circadian surge of all these organizing together. It's like an orchestra, right? Where everything is kind of working together to support certain parts of our physiology. It's not just meant to put us to sleep.
Right.
And so we got to block the artificial light at night and minimize our exposure to that. We have to maybe have blackout curtains to prevent the street lights from leaking in light into our sleep space. We have to get outside, like you said, even in the shade, hopefully with naked skin. It has to be naked skin in order to get that subcellular melatonin produced during the day. Then what are the situations that we look for? Well, I think a lot of Russell's research is pointing to there are some acute reasons to use it. For example, this is something that might not make sense to a lot of people because we've not heard about it, but there's something called a reperfusion injury, which basically means after something like a heart attack, when the blood basically reflows back in, that can actually create a lot of oxidative damage, right? When the red blood cells start to deliver oxygen to the tissue again, it can create a lot of oxidative damage. And so with reperfusion injury, high dose melatonin in certain studies, now a lot of them are animals, but high dose melatonin was shown to very significantly reduce the damage that can create. Similarly with something like someone coming down with COVID or, 4 or 5 days of an elevated dose of melatonin has been shown to really help people kind of clear symptoms, right? And feel like they're restored to their normal energy levels again. And so I think that we have to talk about once one is optimizing their circadian production of it, what does it look like therapeutically then to maybe utilize it for that?
Right. And then cancer also is another situation where you may want to have some therapeutic use of melatonin as well. Because of what's going on in the mitochondria, right?
Exactly, because, and this is Russell's research again. Now this is, for those of you who don't know Russell Ryder, he is the preeminent melatonin researcher in the world.
It's done like 1,500 papers or something
like
crazy.
15 or 1,600 published research articles.
Right.
And he's 86 or 87 years old and sharp as a tack, still publishing, right? He's and so he's explored a lot about melatonin. And what I appreciate is that he's open, right? He's the one with a couple of other researchers who are exploring near infrared light. And melatonin production in the mitochondria. That's a much, much more recent development and awareness of melatonin. And he's very open-minded to exploring that and seeing what that looks like and how to optimize it. And so basically what his research is showing is that there are some really interesting situational uses for actually taking melatonin that can be supportive. He is someone who is personally himself has been taking it now for a very long time, because what his research, but earlier research, maybe this was in the 70s, 80s, I'm not sure exactly when this was published, showed that as one ages, their pineal production of melatonin declines. Now, so he's been taking it ever since then, and he loves it, right? I know other people have done the exact same thing, and I do know for cancer as well, right? That there is research showing benefit because it can halt a Warburg metabolism or a cellular the metabolic environment of cancer cells. But that being said, I have to ask myself: are these studies showing melatonin declining as one gets older, controlling for circadian rhythm,
right?
Controlling for pineal, right? So is it necessary, or if someone's doing more of these circadian quantum practices, is there any additional benefit to supplementing?
Yeah, that's what I wonder, because, I do know that women, as we get older, I work with a lot of women that they start dealing with a lot of insomnia during perimenopause and menopause. Like, it can be debilitating. And it's astonishing to me how many women I've talked to, I'm sure you've had the same experience in practice, that they do this stuff. They really implement the blue blockers. They're strict about it. They're really strict about the morning sunlight. They get the sun exposure during the day. The sleep issues are gone, right? And they're like, I didn't think it was possible to sleep through the night, because everyone says as you get into perimenopause and menopause, you're not going to sleep. You're going to have hot flashes. You're going to have all these disturbances, but they just really do these really simple circadian things and they sleep. So that's kind of where I'm like, okay, I can see this, but how, like we talked about, like most people spend all day indoors. They definitely are not viewing sunrise. They're watching TV at night. Even the most healthy of people, they still don't understand how light impacts their sleep, how it throws off their circadian rhythm. And you cannot make cortisol you can't make cortisol. You can't make melatonin when there is cortisol, like not in adequate amounts to get you to sleep and to do those repair things by the pineal gland. So if you're watching TV, if you've got blue light, in your bedroom, through curtains, all that stuff, like, you're not going to be making adequate melatonin, right?
You're not, right? Because what we see is with artificial light exposure at night from screens or bulbs, you're actually suppressing melatonin by 80% or more. So you're tanking your melatonin, and that makes sense because that blue light's a signal that the day has started again. So your brain's like, oh, I was going to elevate melatonin because I was sensing the day was ending, but nope, the new day has begun. We've dawned another day. Wow. And so cortisol surges. So that's a very vicious combination of cortisol being elevated and melatonin being suppressed. A lot of hormone imbalancing, especially with steroid hormones that can happen with that, but also try to go to bed when your cortisol is elevated at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, right? And your melatonin is tanked. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. You can't do it. So
So, again, going back into it, there's other things about supplementing with it, right? A lot of these studies were done with direct infusion into the blood, which is exactly what would have happened with the pineal gland secreting melatonin directly into the blood. questions still arise with things like taking it via an oral administration.
Yeah, because it's got to go through the gut.
It's got to go through the gut. It's got to go through liver, like a pass through the liver. Right? So things like that. The other thing that was interesting was the podcast that Dr. Sarah Pugh did recently with Dr. Stephanie Seneff, where they did talk about melatonin, because Stephanie was basically like, no, I'm not going to supplement melatonin. And she's like, if anything, I would supplement tryptophan. And she said, and the reason it had to do with deuterium. She said the body has a ton of different mechanisms to make sure that as you basically add different hydrogens onto the tryptophan to convert it to serotonin and then to convert it to melatonin, that those hydrogens are not deuterium. You do not want those hydrogens to be deuterium, or it changes it, and it doesn't allow for that melatonin to be as biologically active as what I think she was saying. And she's like, so she would rather just, if someone was dealing with sleep issues or a need for increased melatonin, she would rather just supplement the basic amino acid tryptophan and then allow the body to take that tryptophan through all of its processes to put on deuterium depleted hydrogens for it to be a more active molecule, either as serotonin or melatonin. Whereas she recognizes that there's zero control for deuterium in melatonin supplements. And that's hence why that there's potentially a lot of deuterium that can be consumed from supplements, because they just stick a hydrogen on, right? In chemistry, they're not controlling for whether that hydrogen is actually the quote unquote normal hydrogen that the body wants, the protium, versus whether it's a deuterium, which too much deuterium can be detrimental.
Right. Absolutely. So she's not into supplementing melatonin. She would rather you take tryptophan because of the conversion, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's something that I would suggest, if someone is interested in increasing their melatonin levels, that might be a first line to see if it's supported, right? And if it were me, I would actually I would probably take tryptophan the night before, right? But I would not expect maybe that first night to have a much benefit.
Good point.
Because that tryptophan has to go through the next day's cycle, basically, of serotonin to all, right? And so, sometimes people take something one night, it's like, oh, that didn't work at all. And so I would say, give it a little time, right? Because there is the potential for tryptophan to be lacking in us these days. And for those who don't know, this is the pathway, right? Tryptophan, there's a couple of steps in between that we're not highlighting, but tryptophan in response to morning light becomes serotonin. And that serotonin then in response to darkness becomes melatonin. And so that tryptophan there is research indicating that people are more tryptophan deficient these days, because technically we're meant to make a lot of tryptophan by our gut microbiome. They're designed to make those aromatic amino acids like tryptophan, and glyphosate completely wipes those out, right? It's called the shikimate pathway. They basically completely wipes out the ability to make those. So think about someone who is maybe even trying to eat really healthfully, but doesn't control for something like glyphosate exposure. Which, eating organic these days is expensive, right? So I can't blame someone for going the conventional route and potentially eating sprayed fruits and vegetables and food. Right. But, again, that's something else to address, right? Like maybe your gut microbiome isn't making tryptophan. So by taking tryptophan, it can maybe support sleep within a couple of nights.
Exactly. Yeah. Something to try if you're having issues sleeping and you're doing all the circadian things, because you and I are both like not telling people to go take supplements as like, just do that. Cause I think that's the biggest problem that I have with the functional medicine model is here's a supplement. We don't ask you about your light environment. We don't ask you about what your day looks like. We don't ask you how your work environment looks like. We don't talk about blue light after dark. We just say, take this before bed and it'll help you sleep. Right? There's so many different things that play into how well your body is going to be able to even uptake these supplements as well. So it's important to have that conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I, every practitioner I think means well, right?
Oh, so definitely. Absolutely.
I'm not hearing you say that. Like, I'm just wanting to reassure everyone, like, a traditional MD or DO has a patient who says, doc, I haven't been able to sleep for months. It's driving me crazy. It's just ruining my life. Well, the doctor's going to use what's in the toolbox, right? Which is typically a prescription sleep aid or a muscle relaxant sometimes, right? But a prescription. And then you have a functional doctor who says, has a patient who comes in and says the same thing, well, they're going to be like, oh, well, this is much better than your prescription sleep aid because it's all natural, right? Your body makes it,
Right.
But then I think what we're doing is we're taking the conversation to a little bit even more nuanced area where if the body can make it, can we optimize that first and then see if that affects sleep in a beneficial way?
Yeah. Because sometimes supplements can serve as suppressive therapies, I think, as well, and can kind of block your body's own endogenous ability to make things if we're just going to the supplements.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. And I don't know if in particular melatonin has been shown to downregulate in response to supplementation. And I was trying to comb through a little bit.
Yeah, I've been trying to find that myself because that's one of the common things people say is like, if your body makes it, don't take it, which I agree with on vitamin D. We talked about that last week. I'm not a big fan of vitamin D supplementation at all, but I haven't been able to substantially find a ton of research that shows that it's going to cut down on your own endogenous production. Not to say that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I just haven't seen it necessarily. So I'm still open-minded, I'm still open-minded with it. I do feel like melatonin you have to also think about blood levels of melatonin don't get elevated anywhere near to the extent that people are supplementing with these days.
Right.
I see in kids melatonin gummies 3 to 10 milligrams of melatonin, which the pineal gland's making I think it's 1.3.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
It's not a lot of melatonin at all that then gets circulated. And so you have to ask yourself, are we doing things by giving such supraphysiologic doses? Is that affecting things in the long term? And I do know that there is research pointing to sometimes puberty suppression, with high dose melatonin, so it can potentially impact things. I just think I just don't think I'm there to hate on people for taking melatonin supplements.
I think you have to be careful with kids, because it is a hormone, and I understand what it's like to have a kid that won't sleep and it's super stressful, but because of that, again, that puberty suppression and the hormone element, I'm super careful around kids and people that I'm like, maybe you might want to try it out. Again, COVID as a temporary, supplementation to get through that. And this is not medical advice. None of this podcast is medical advice. We can't give protocols through email or DM. So please don't do that. That's something that, maybe we talk about in our private membership groups a little bit more in depth, but for the intensive purposes of a podcast, I'm just saying those are instances, COVID, cancer, maybe after a heart attack. Those are some things where I'm like, maybe do take a look at doing a little supplementation. But as a general rule, I think you and I both agree that people need to be working on sunlight exposure. That morning light UVA is when we really get that serotonin that gets later, or the tryptophan, serotonin, all that stuff happens in UVA light. And then daytime, the near infrared, when we're getting it on our skin, subcellular melatonin to kind of clean up that damage as we go through the day. And then darkness at night, blocking artificial light at night and not being on your TV or phone screens. And if you do blue blockers, cover up your skin and don't do it too close to bed, Sure. I understand people are going to do it. So if you're going to do it, just try to keep it away from bedtime as much as you can, because the neurotransmitters are going to also impact your sleep as well. Dopamine. Dopamine. And I think it was Rob was saying something about dopamine and melatonin. I don't know if you know much about this, but supposedly they're kind of similar to the way cortisol and melatonin are. You can't have elevated dopamine, and melatonin production at the same time.
Interesting. And I'm wondering if that is specifically in the pineal and the hypothalamic type pathways.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, I don't think it's subcellular melatonin. I think it's just that. Yeah, that's what he was telling me about a study that said that. So I was like, oh, that makes very interesting. I'm gonna look into that because everyone's like, oh, the light, the cortisol, the blue light, but also if you're getting even if you got your blue blockers on and your phone screen is red and you're plugged into an Ethernet jack, which I'm going to assume that 99% of people are not even doing those things. But even for the people that are, you still have to be mindful of the dopamine, I think as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I just that Ethernet thing, their non-native EMFs can also reduce pineal melatonin release.
I'm glad you said that. Yeah. Because it's a form of light that we cannot see. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's just similar to, it's light, right? And even if we can't see it yet, it's the pineal gland is always looking for sources of light. And I
think that's why people see their HRV. One of the reasons, not the only reason, there's multiple reasons, but one of the reasons you can see your HRV go up a lot of the times when you turn the Wi-Fi off is that, you're maybe able to make more pineal melatonin and get into better sleep.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, just, I guess to summarize here is that the research really is fascinating. And I think there are some situational uses where I would want to have melatonin on hand.
Yeah.
And so I think there is the potential for melatonin supplementation in a therapeutic way to be supportive. Long term, I don't think it's a solution by any means, right? I think we have to work on what is causing your sleep disruption to begin with. Could it be the artificial light? Could it be lack of morning light? Could it be not a dark enough sleep environment, not cold enough sleep environment? Could it be too much stressful? Even reading, I've had clients who mystery novels
murder
or something.
Mysteries.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Where it's like, well, let's read something boring.
Right, exactly, exactly.
Before bed. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that we can look at before we would potentially touch melatonin supplementation to promote sleep. And I do feel like the uses of melatonin that I'm reading in the literature don't necessarily highlight sleep. They're highlighting all these other aspects that can be supported based on, like we said, cancer or heart issues and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, this has been a great topic. And Russell Reiter is Reiter. If you're looking to look into some of his work, and Carrie and she sent me that Mercola Writer podcast that was done in the fall of 2022. So not super long ago. If you want to dive deeper into some of his research, I think that's a really, really great podcast to start with. And
let me tell you one more person who I found as I did my deep dive. Roger Sheholt, Sheheult, who is a doctor who's really part of the whole near infrared and melatonin. He's now has a really interesting lectures and some interviews on YouTube where he's touting it's not just about vitamin D in the skin. Now he's you're forgetting infrared. It's nice to hear it from other people as well. Yeah. But he's got some really great research and information that he's putting out as well.
Very cool. Well, we'll definitely encourage people to go look at those resources. And this has been really fun. Thanks for chatting today, Carrie.
Thanks, Sarah.